6 o'clock. This is the meeting of the Building and Housing Committee of Council. It is Monday, April 21st. I'm Winifred Weiser. I'm the chair of the committee. Present are committee members, Councilman John Rock and Councilman Christopher Cooney. Also, and our alternate, Councilman Brian King. Also present are Councilwoman Sherry Sachs, Vice Mayor Michelle Weiss. And from the administration, Bill Bartley, our building head, Markel Davis, the Director of Housing and Community Development, Brad Bryan, the Law Director, and Mayor Michael Dillon Brennan has just walked into the room. Also present is Phil McFerrin, who is the HR person for the city. And with that, we will begin business. First item of business is the discussion of ordinance 2024-77, which amends Exhibit A of the salary ordinance relating to city non-bargaining unit positions to include the position of the community development coordinator and establish the pay range therefore. This was referred to the committee. It's been discussed. Just a little bit of history. We requested more detail as to what the community development coordinator was actually tasked with doing. At the last meeting, Mr. McFerrin gave us a presentation on a totally revised job description, which added great clarity that we had been asking for a few months. And then we actually requested some minor revisions to it, which he added in, and that was sent to all the committee members earlier this week, or pardon me, at the end of last week. Can't get any earlier than a Monday. And I requested that people review it. Hopefully we can move this along today. So I will open it up for comments, discussion on the revision of the position that y'all were sent. Any discussion? Councilman Cooney,
Not at this time.
Councilman King,
Not this time.
Councilman Rock.
No further comment.
Anybody else? Or we're all good with the changes? I think Councilwoman Sachs, you had requested one regarding the grants.
So we're talking about the one position or all the positions?
No, we're only talking about the position of the coordinator.
I was asking, or wondering, about responsibilities for grants. I think I mentioned it last time. Writing, tracking, reporting, and working with the various, other departments. Is there a
There's no microphone.
microphone?
Yeah, we need a microphone.
That's an invisible microphone.
Here we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, I'm sure you noticed item 5 was added to the job description, or maybe not. It's a rather robust job description item.
It's separated from my packet.
Okay. So I'll give you a chance maybe to review that and then answer any specific questions you may have.
Okay, so is, I guess my only question, thank you very much, because this covers a nice detail. My only question is the intention just grants just for housing and community development?
Email too.
I mean, the fire department, that they seem to write their own grants, so is it just for that, or is it for other, like service department, or, some other grants that we go for?
I think that this person can be available for consultation.
Consultation.
And if there are specific grants that are interwoven in and out. Certainly, I think the intent is that this person will be available for that. But their primary responsibility would be the grant process within the
Housing
building. And
community development.
yes,
Just clear, that's clear. Thank you for clarifying that. That's what we want in the city, you know, when it appears in other job descriptions for plethora of other types of grants.
Yeah, but with this,
I know,
this
I
is the
know.
only one we're talking about
that's-
right now, is
so for
Councilwoman
this-
Sachs.
Yeah, and in terms of being available, I would hope everybody collaborates with the grants,
that's
you
the
know.
way the world should work.
That's how
I
you
would
get
agree.
funding.
Correct,
Thank you.
correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Do I have a motion on this?
So moved
So move what?
to refer to city council approval. Is this what you're looking for? I'm sorry.
Well, we
I'm
gotta
sorry,
do
that's
something.
fine. I
with
should
it.
rephrase.
We have to, we
should
have to
rephrase.
do something with it.
I should rephrase.
We had on the discussion of the ordinance, possible referral to finance. Because now that we fleshed out the job description,
Okay.
then because the ordinance actually deals with what the person gets paid. So now that we finally fleshed out what the person should do, we then have a better sense of the salary range that's been assigned to it, because the other way, when we were asking, what is it? We really couldn't comment on it. So it probably,
Okay,
I would think finance, maybe?
sure. Actually, let me withdraw my,
Sure.
all right. And, Ms. Davis. We had a discussion that you were looking for more of a separation between housing and community development, because right now, essentially, it's all kind of on your lap at this point, at this time.
Correct.
The way that the job description is written, and if you're looking at the responsibilities of housing and what this can essentially move over to community development. Are you satisfied? Are you for the responsibilities that this person would take on?
Yes, my only concern is,
Can you speak into the
Oh,
microphone? Thank you, Marco.
is the availability of the person to all other departments.
Or, okay,
What do you mean?
What do you mean, Marco?
Specifically, I think Councilwoman Sachs spoke about fire, writing their own grants. So I guess clarity on what was asked.
Yeah.
Is it that if other departments would need this individual to write the grant?
I
That's
think
what
the key word would be consultation. I think the hope is that we can hire somebody with grant writing experience that may be able to lend a hand, but not own the grant writing for other departments.
sure.
So there's a big difference there. So if somebody needs help, questions, assistance in the grant process, I think this person, like anybody else, would be available to answer questions, but not get into the weeds of the fire department, right?
Okay,
Or things like that. So it's truly just as a resource rather than as, an essential job element.
thank you. So Councilman Cooney, the answer is yes.
All right, thank you. And I think what struck me is basically the first sentence of that, coordinate, manage the city's grant application administration processes to support community development initiatives. That's going to be the primary function. Going a little bit further is to research funding opportunities to prepare competitive grant applications in collaboration with city departments and community partners. And I think that's where your consultation is really, that when you say consultation, that's second sentence is what strikes me as that's what you're referring to.
Yes,
So
this idea of collaboration,
basically, I'm here if
There
you
are
need me. more or
glass
less.
walls between departments, they should be able to work together.
Right.
However, I think the primary grant application process would belong to another member of another department with assistance from this person should they need it.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Councilman Rock?
You brought up a good point as we looked at this job description, I didn't have any more comments on it, but with regard to the salary range, that's something we had not talked about before. Is that best fit then in the finance committee? Because if that's the case, then I could move that we refer that to the finance committee.
Are you making a motion?
Does that sound like that would be a fair? Okay, then I'll make that motion to refer that to the finance committee.
Yeah,
Is
I'll
that
second that
second?
range.
I would second that.
Any further discussion? Councilwoman Sachs.
Thank you. So I'm hearing it a little bit differently now, just to, so people know, when you say in consultation, kind of doesn't mean anything. I'm trying to think practically what that means. Either a person writes a grant or they don't. And either, and in terms of writing grants, you have to get information from everybody. So unless our departments are pretty thin, I mean, the police department does their own, the fire department does their own pretty much. So don't worry about that. They are very specific. They're very technical. But I use service as an example, that's, you don't have people in there who can write grants, and you have other administrative areas. So I'm not sure. Right now, I'm reading it as writes the grants for this department.
That is the primary responsibility. If, and Mayor and I have spoken about this, that let's use example, the street department, service department. If there's a grant to be written, ideally, it should be managed within that department.
Oh, yeah, man.
And should this person not be available because they're doing work within their own job, within their own department, that work is priority. And I guess I would also point out the construction of this job description, there's a reason it's number 5, is because the previous 4 items are primary to the grant writing process. So should the work be necessary for community development, writing a grant for the street department, they would be available to consult, to speak to them, to maybe provide assistance, but not to write their grant should the first 4 elements be consuming of their time.
Thank you.
We have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion on that motion? Then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Well, obviously not opposed. So this is referred to the Finance Committee with a notation that what they're looking at is the updated job description and the salary range that is assigned to that job description in the ordinance. That moves that off of our agenda.
Madam Chair,
And
I would like to make myself available to the Finance Committee meeting.
Great.
Additionally, with your permission, I am not going to stay for the rest of this meeting or your council meeting, so I would ask your permission to excuse myself.
I think we can grant that quite happily. And since the chair of the Finance Committee is here, she knows that you would like an invite. Come to that.
Well, I'm not necessarily like one. I would just like to make myself available should you need me. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. McFerrin.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Okay. All right. I had emailed Alex, who is one of the individuals who had brought up the issue about the railing requirements for second floor porches. We actually had talked about this very, very briefly once before, just in very general terms. And I think actually a couple of people had shown up and nobody showed up tonight. I would entertain a motion to just leave this on the agenda and pick it up at the next meeting where it's at the top. Because when they came last time, we spent the whole time on this ordinance, and they may not have come tonight thinking, why come if we can't give input? And then we could potentially do something with it.
Yeah,
Vice
just
Mayor.
wanted to make a suggestion. Maybe we could call Alex, and also Kevin from BZA was.
Yes, Kevin Goodman
Maybe
as
we could
well.
call them to
Yeah.
come to the next meeting.
Yeah, if you'd share his,
Okay.
I couldn't find his information on the city website. We really need a listing of all these people on the committees. Okay, The next thing is the discussion of delays of implementation of ordinances. Um, and Ms. Davis, have we done anything to implement the short-term rental ordinance yet?
The answer is no.
Do you have any idea why we haven't?
Yes, so I have multiple questions pertaining to this ordinance. Um, specifically, in reading the ordinance, I'm not sure if it's just housing that would need to review the applications. For example, it speaks to submitting a drawing for approved parking. And that's not something that we would do in the housing department.
I can speak. to
Let's,
that. We
let's,
had-
how about if, on things like this, Ms. Davis, if you have questions like that, the appropriate person to first reach out to is our law director. Because he is the final person that evaluates questions regarding our ordinances. Hold on. I will admit, I'm a very unhappy camper about this. And I'm an unhappy camper because we went through this and finished it before summer last year. So this is something that has been dragging on now for over 6 months. And I can appreciate, we also went through the change in directors in your department and you've had to pick up and get up to speed. So please don't take that as a critique of you personally. But those kind of things, please let Mr. Bryan know so we can move these things along. Mr. Bryan?
Yeah, we did have speak about that briefly in the staff meeting this morning and again, the only drawing requires, it can be hand drawn. We don't need a plan is to show the amount of parking available. Because there's limits on occupancy, 2 people per bedroom plus an extra 3 people in the ordinance. So the application, when someone fills it out, they're gonna say what the occupancy load is. When the initial inspection's done, we're gonna verify those things. And parking, I think you require 1 space for each 2 occupants. So you need to just submit a drawing, to show where the cars would go in the driveway to show you have enough.
So you've been updated about that?
That was
No.
that was just this morning.
No.
So when do you think this will finally be implemented?
Well, so I'll admit that I actually thought that this was still in draft. Especially because the system that we use, CitizenServe, doesn't even have no one ever asked for this to be submitted because I would think that this needs to have a different prefix than the long-term or the apartments. So there's multiple issues, I feel, with the ordinance. I think we discussed the taxes that needs to be collected. Is that calculation done in the housing department in addition to the insurance coverage and reviewing that? And is this now considered commercial versus a regular rental?
All right, what I would like, would you please put this all in writing to Mr. Bryan and CC me? And we will discuss this for sure at the next meeting
Yes.
so that we have resolution on this before summer hits and the short-term rentals start to increase. And then we have complaints. And then we have neighbors that complain. This has been danced around now for a year.
If I could just briefly comment, aside from those issues, I mean, the only way to get it going is, publicity needs to be publicized. We have a short-term rental ordinance. You need to comply. And then there's going to be obviously sector of property owners that aren't going to voluntarily come forward. So, for any type of enforcement, it would take somebody actually going online, looking for short-term rentals in the city, and then reaching out directly to those people, advising them, we have an ordinance, we need to apply certificates.
I think we discover a number of them as people call and complain.
Right, we've had it.
And apparently,
particular.
we're either not following up on the complaints or we have additional issues. This is, it becomes frustrating when in good faith, we do all of the work to address an issue in this city, pass an ordinance, which then becomes a part of the laws of the city and administratively can't seem to move it forward. So I think let's find out all these issues. Let's get it capped now. Have Mr. Bryant respond and then get going on it. Any other comments? We seem to have choice of what we choose to implement or not. All right, new business. Discussion of fines for not cutting grass. I put this on because at last year, when we had the assessment ordinance come through. I don't know if you're familiar with the whole process, Ms. Davis, where once sighting starts for grass height, if the grass isn't cut and then the commercial contractor comes in and does the cut, the resident gets billed. And they get billed the cut and the fine. I think the fine's $100. I noticed in the assessment at the end of the season, we take all of the ones that have not been paid, because there is a time requirement for when they have to be paid. And that is added on to the property assessment. Okay. I noticed in the listing of the property assessments that there were a large number of single cut fines where it was like $150. And at that time, I mentioned that we might consider doing a letter that would give them a one shot at the end, where maybe we would take $25 off the fine. If you pay it now, it's $125. If you don't, then the assessment would be $150, or charge a late fee on top of it. Is that, I think that's in the ordinance, isn't it, Brad?
There's an amount, I think there's a
The fine,
late fee, but there's also an additional charge for the ones that are put on the tax duplicate. There's an
Okay.
additional cost for that. I'm not sure. I think it's $100 or $150. So maybe that's something that,
we might be able to, is it possible? Since with this, and I think that comes out of finance though,
It
the
does.
listing.
It does.
You don't do any, your department does no follow-up on it. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that actually is something we should take to finance. And that might be a way to get the money in before we actually start sticking it on somebody's assessment.
right, I think the thing to do, right, would be to send a letter, we're going to send this to the county fiscal officer for placement on the tax duplicate. That's gonna cost you an additional money, plus the county's gonna add their 1.5% or 2.5%, whatever they add on. You pay it by this date, save some amount of money. That might encourage people to pay.
Councilman Cooney?
Yeah, you're referring to the, I'm trying to find the exact date. It was Mr. Engelbrecht presented that information because they had a list of the houses
Right,
and the
yeah,
cost per.
yeah.
I guess my question would be if we could get an updated version, see what has been collected. Either the homeowner has paid or, because it would go to the, would it go to the county?
It goes to the county, it's on their
It's on their
taxes.
taxes.
So they
Yes.
pay it with their taxes.
The first meeting
So
in
that's it.
September is usually when we do it once a year.
Right, yeah, I was trying to find the exact date, because I think that was part of a council meeting,
Yeah, it
I
was.
believe, yeah,
We approve putting it on the assessment.
right.
So the list, in looking at the list, I'll hunt it up. Check the first or second meeting in September.
Yeah,
It's the
Or,
first, should be the first.
or I'm sure Dennis could give you the.
Yeah.
information.
Deadline's usually before the.
Yeah. And take a look at what was submitted to us, and what you're gonna find is there's a whole bunch of, I think it was $150,
yeah,
which would indicate one cut that they didn't pay for.
Right.
The ones that I think we're really wanting to collect on are the ones where there are multiple cuts, where some of those bills are close to 2,000.
we were becoming the city was becoming the landscaping company.
Yes, this happens.
Yeah.
And that's not our job.
Right, and yeah, so 108404, it's $100 for the first offense and $200 for the second.
So if it's only 150, they've only missed one cut and didn't pay for it. And they didn't have a second offense.
Right.
Councilwoman Sacks,
Thank you. Who's responsible to send out the letters? At the finance department?
that finance department,
Thank
yeah. The way I talked to Mr. Engelbrecht about it, the way it happens is the person that we hire to do the cutting, the housing department gives them a list of the houses that were tagged. They go by, they see it isn't cut, they do the cut, they take a picture, and the picture and then goes to finance, and finance does the physical billing. So it's sort of it starts with housing and then goes to finance. So I think Vice Mayor indicated she'll put that on her agenda, and that way we get it to the right group to deal with. Since housing doesn't have to deal with that part, thank goodness. In terms of other new business, how often, let me rephrase that, Ms. Davis, and I don't know if you can answer this question. How often are we running across rental houses that do not have rental permits?
I can't say that that happens often. I won't say that it doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen often.
So we may have a lot of rentals, we may have a few rentals
We have a lot of rentals.
that don't have permits.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought you meant just.
Okay, let me finish the statement there. So we don't have a lot of, we may not have, I should say, may not have a lot of rentals that don't have permits, but we only come across them when an issue arises.
That's correct.
So we don't have any way of verifying if some of these houses are being rented.
No.
This is purely informational. We do have a listing of the owners of all these properties, right?
For the perm, you mean like the data that's on the county?
Yeah, yeah. Who owns what?
The titled owner?
Yeah,
Correct.
and we have like tax information that we use to send things to people. Do we do anything where we have a out of city owner and the house is not listed as a rental? Is there any way to flag that?
Flag it where?
I don't know. Do we have those databases? Do you have access to those databases?
My answer is gonna be no.
Okay,
Ask me the question again.
okay. Some of the issues that we have or at least one that I'm aware of, where a house is owned by someone who does not live in the city of University Heights, but is being used as a rental and doesn't have a rental permit. Is there any way to catch that?
I would say it's probably filtered in by complaints. Because how would we know that it's a rental? I mean, you may catch it on the point of sale on the assumption form when it asks you when you're purchasing a home, will it be owner occupied? But other than that, you have the ones that are not going to be
Well,
called.
that's right. The county has to note owner occupied houses. I wonder if we could get a list from the county.
People don't always update.
Correct.
I suspect there's a lot of people that are listed owner occupied and getting the tax break.
And also renting the house.
It goes the
without
other
the
way too.
permits.
Yeah, I've found probably close to a dozen people who have not had the owner occupied credit and have let them know that they could apply for it.
Excuse me? Do that
I've
again?
run into at least a dozen residents who have not had the owner occupied credit and let them know, and then I let them know that they,
That's a good
Yeah.
thing if they're living there.
Yeah.
But if they're not, that's. I just, one of the challenges with housing has always been we are limited by information and the amount of information that we can obtain. And that leads to a number of issues, because we have what, about 1,000 rentals in the city, which is a quarter of our housing stock.
That's correct.
And that alone can be problematic. Vice Mayor?
I guess maybe one first step would be, are there any interns that are devoted just to housing?
No,
So I guess I'm asking the mayor, where are the interns?
Well, right now we have only one intern, but this summer we were looking at having an intern that we would dedicate to housing.
Okay, I mean, maybe that could be the first step and then, I mean, pull the owner occupancy from the county, even though it might be inaccurate, but start digging in that way.
I know South Euclid, well, actually, when Grogan Myers was here, and when the Housing and Community Development Department was formed, what he did, he actually did, or had an intern do it. They did a inventory of vacancies. And that would go back to 2020, which means now this is 5 years later. That might be something. I don't know what kind of records you have in housing from Mr. Grogan Myers when he was the director. But he was pretty organized. He may actually have had how he went about to do that. I know they did it in South Euclid using interns where they knocked on doors to find all of the vacant houses. And that way they had a complete list. And I know when we were out campaigning in last year, we kept running into vacant houses and then kicking the addresses to Jeff. So perhaps asking anybody else who's out there knocking to get, vacants to you so you're aware of them. If you're not aware of them now, that might be really helpful.
you're saying the vacancies to help determine the rentals?
Well, if you know houses are vacant, number one, they can be vacant for any one of a number of reasons. But if they're long-term vacancies, then the tax records can be checked to see if the taxes are being paid on the thing. Because that's part of trying to keep up with the housing stock. I know we had one on Canterbury that went through probate and had 6 owners, and it took them 10 years to get it down to 1 owner. And the entire time the house was empty. And fortunately, somebody actually bought it out of the last owner and then flipped it. And it's finally back in service. But when we have houses that are out for that length of time, you end up with the possibility of people breaking into them, stripping them. And once you get that in a neighborhood, you end up seeing issues you don't want to see in those neighborhoods. So I might do a little research in that area and see what I can come up with as well. Vice Mayor?
I have one other like issue if you're, I wasn't sure if you're finished.
No,
with-
go ahead.
So I know that Mr. Bartley and Ms. Davis, so Ms. Davis, I don't know if she is aware of this because it's been like a 3-year issue with this house on Vernon and the lot behind it, which is that whole Whole Foods lot and the new seafood restaurant. I forget the name of it. But
Oh, you're talking about Kerwin?
no, about
Cedar.
Where is
like
this?
on Vernon.
Oh, Vernon.
It's like Vernon Cedar.
Yeah,
So,
behind the seafood place.
Yeah.
That's that issue on
so
that
what
side.
happened like the last number of years, and both of them are aware of it, because I keep forwarding the owners' emails. People are dumping garbage in the lot, and it's like a housing building, like, can you explain the process of that whole issue and who's responsible for it?
So I think initially it was housing because I supervised Mr. Ford, who is contracted through Safe Bill, because he's the commercial inspector.
Okay,
So that was the reason that, I believe it was
housing that was
Yes.
originally contacted.
yes.
And is that still? It's still gonna be it's still housing, because now we hired Mr. Ford? Is that?
No, we did not hire Mr. Ford. We hired Mr. Dominic.
Oh. Okay, so it really still should be going to you because you're supervising Mr. Ford.
Yes,
Okay, so,
I'm sorry. No, Mr. Ford, correct.
Right.
Yeah.
so, like, so,
What am I doing today?
so Mr. Ford is the one that's in touch with that owner of that lot to make sure it stays clean? Like, what's the, because it keeps happening over and over and over again.
So
especially-
I actually sent an inspector out the day you sent the email, and it was actually cleared.
Oh, they cleared it out.
So will only assume that it's constantly happening. And so when he originally went to the business directly in the front, he stated that it was city property, but then in looking at the county, it's actually a part of the entire parking lot belonging to Whole Foods, Goodwill, et cetera.
Okay.
So,
All right, it's just because since it's an ongoing issue and I know there was
Mhm.
crossover between building and housing, I wanted to make sure that I understood it, and so that's good that it was cleaned up, so maybe they're aware that they have to keep doing that.
yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
If I can make a comment towards, who's responsible and things like that, and that, even though someone else is putting the debris on an owner's property, it's still that owner's responsibility, especially in a commercial sense where, if that continues to happen, they have to take measures to stop it happening. So, that's where they gather evidence, report people, put up fencing, things like that,
Garbage containers,
Pardon?
right?
or garbage containers.
There actually is a garbage container directly in that corner, but
Don't we have we have an ordinance on dumping? I would
Littering,
think.
We have unclean premises, we have a lot of,
Yeah, but if,
but it's not necessarily a speedy process for housing.
yeah, but if the police see somebody dumping something on that property, they have the,
Littering, sure.
they
write it.
they can enforce it. I don't know if making Chief Rogers aware of the issue also, and just asking him to, if this is as consistent, that means somebody is consistently going at a certain time to do it, which might, or at least a certain day.
So let's take one step back then. So if somebody, we had this also, it happened to be on Vernon also, this one house has a shopping cart and tires and whatever. That owner is the one that is putting that garbage there, but when does it go to service to get fined and actually picked up if they're not doing it?
They have to tag it. You tag it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the follow-up
So
is-
housing tags it first
Yes.
and then service goes to pick it up with a fine?
So housing will tag it first and then do the follow-up to see if it's been abated. And if not, it's then turned into service.
Okay, what's the timeline on that usually?
For the cleanup
Yeah, for the cleanup.
of that part, I will allow Alan to speak to that.
Yeah, maybe, Mr.
Bear with me here, guys.
It's not just that. I mean, like, there's other,
Oh, yeah,
people are
yeah.
calling, oh, this animal got into this garbage across the street from our house. They're not cleaning it up, like that kind of stuff.
Okay, ultimately, once they tag and cite an owner, they then have to go back and verify after a certain number of days. After that has occurred, then at some point they send an abatement notice over to my department, typically via email or something in our office. At that point, then I have to schedule an abatement based upon my workers' availability to go out and get it. It varies from property to property on whether we can get it done in a day or two, or whether I would wait till a Friday or even a Saturday, depending upon the volume of what we have on that particular site and what we run into there. We had one where we tried to do on Silsby recently, where the property owner came out and attempted to stop us from taking the items from the backyard. So
Oh, I
it,
hope.
so it's one of those situations where you have to then look at getting housing back involved as well as police. In that case, we cleaned up the brush. They let us take the brush and the other items. The personal items they still had in the backyard, they were given additional time, I guess, by the inspector to get those items out of their backyard.
Is the city allowed to go in the backyard or they need a?
If there's an abatement notice, we
They-
go and we
they're
clear.
Legally allowed to. So from the first complaint or call, it's what, about a 2-week process?
I'd say give or take, because I'm not sure how many days you give them on the
30.
abatement. They said 3 days. And then by the time it gets over to us and we can schedule the work, it could be 2 weeks. Could be less, but it really depends upon when we get the notice and when we can get our personnel in there with a truck to access the items.
I know the couple I referred to from resident complaints to Jeff took about, they were quickly done, but they were rentals where the landlords would come in and do some work and just dump the stuff behind the garage, neglecting to think that the property owner directly behind was having the joy of what accumulated because the stuff had been dumped there. That is not a small problem. And
And when some people try to do a rehab on a house, they just dump everything out in their driveway or in their yard or in whatever, it becomes a problem for us. Trying to sometimes have to bring our skid steer in to pick up the broken tile and drywall and the other things they throw out.
I know,
It becomes quite.
we still have something sitting on Tullamore
You mean
that
without a
Jeff talked
dumpster?
about.
Without a dumpster?
Huh?
Without a?
No, no,
dumpster?
these are without dumpsters.
Yeah, they tear it out and throw it outside and then leave it for citation and
Maybe we should start looking at fines for those items. We can't reward bad behavior.
right.
Because it's not, pardon me, it's not the person, the house or the unit that actually has to deal with some of the issues. It's the neighbors around those units, especially if we end up with rats. And unfortunately, that's part of our urban wildlife in the Heights, and it's not going to go away.
Ms. West, just, you do charge when you do abatements, though, right?
What I do is I note the time, manpower and equipment we use, and we turn that back over to housing, which they then, I believe, forward it to
Finance.
finance for.
So those
charge.
get billed at a much higher rate than a standard pickup.
Yeah, I would assume that they do. I don't know what they charge, but that's all handled through finance and housing.
That might be something also for finance to look at. Nice here. All right. So anything else? I mean, it's going to be prime season. Where now that the spring is here. And we have every little happy squirrel, possum, raccoon, all skunks, all busy having babies. And then we have lots of interesting things arise because suddenly people are realizing they're all showing up in their yards. And also more people are gonna be out. It's gonna be more, oh, look at that house, so. If there's any other things for the Housing, Building and Housing Committee from anybody on the committee or any of the council people, please send them to me. We have the opportunity to have at least 2 more meetings. Our next meeting, definitely at the top, is going to be the discussion of the rail requirements for second floor porches. And we can get something moving there. We'll also deal with the short-term rental ordinance. We'll come up with an update on that since Ms. Davis will send to Mr. Brian all of her items and questions that he can respond to. And we can review that. Hopefully we can get that moving before we hit summer. When people decide to rent to too many people on an Airbnb and it becomes a party house. And that can happen with a lot of the current rentals we have since John Carroll students will no longer be in them. Any other business? No other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Huh? I signed in. I'm not in the committee. Fine.